Hey guys, this week we're going to talk about rhetoric. And rhetoric plays really well into what we learned about last week with ethos, pathos, and logos, because those are types of rhetorical appeals. Okay, so in order to understand that, right, we have to understand what rhetoric is. And rhetoric, it almost sounds scary to students, right? It's this weird word. What does it mean? But actually, rhetoric is really, really simple, because all rhetoric is anything. Okay, so anything that you do in order to get your message to your audience, or anything someone does in order to get their message to the audience. Okay, and so it's this really broad, actual term, and everything really falls into it. So sometimes that makes it hard because it's like, well, everything, then what does that even mean? But hopefully it makes it easier, because when we look at something, we can decide, was this like a conscious decision from our author, right? Or what are we doing that's trying to get our message to our audience? So the easiest kind of way that's been around forever and ever is called the rhetorical triangle. And hopefully soon I'm going to get my cool writing pad that I'll be able to do this, but for right now I don't have it. So I'm just going to show you on a piece of paper. Okay. So, and this comes back from like the days of Aristotle. So it's been around forever. So there's this triangle. I know, so beautiful. Maybe I'll edit this so this is all smooth. Okay, so we have this triangle, and we have our speaker, right? So who's actually doing the communication, whether that's speaking through an actual speech, whether that's speaking through the ad that you guys looked at, like who's actually putting out the ad, right? Who's producing it. We have our audience, and we have our message. Okay, why are we doing this? What does this mean? Okay, and those make up the three corners of the triangle. Okay, so we have our speaker, and we have our audience and message. And it doesn't matter at all what corner you put these at, because it all does. Okay, and so what rhetoric is all the stuff in the middle. Okay, and we've kind of broken it down that tone matters, right? What tone that we're going to actually use, what rhetorical mode. And again, we're going to go into all of these in more detail, okay? So don't stress too much. And then our rhetorical devices. And so what we're going to focus on a lot are rhetorical devices. Like, what can we actually use in order to have effective communication and get our message to our audience, okay? So that's what makes up the inside of this thing, okay? So, but we also have some stuff going on the outside, right? So we want our speaker, when they're thinking about their audience, they're gonna say, okay, how do we say this? Whoops. And then also, what do we say, right? So how do we get that message? Sorry, this is ending up being like a really boring video with me being, and then the content that goes between it. Okay, so our speaker has to make some decisions. Okay, so first he's deciding, or they're deciding, what do they want to do, right? Which eventually comes up to be, what is the message? So you have to know that, right? You have to decide, what am I actually trying to accomplish? Or to try to break down, what is this person trying to accomplish in whatever they're doing, right? So what's the message? So you have to decide, what are we actually saying, okay? And then we have to decide, how do we say that? How do we then reach whoever our audience is going to be? Okay, and then obviously then the content is between those things. So that's kind of really important. And so some of our 3 rhetorical strategies that we've learned about, right, last week. Oh, this is such a good box, you guys. This is why I don't teach art class and I teach English, because I can't draw. Okay. So remember I said that any good communication will have these things, right? They have ethos, pathos, and logos. That's what I mean by these things. Obviously, you guys should just know what that means. Okay, so then we have our rhetorical strategies, okay, which are these things that we'll always have. And then we're going to break down, okay, what actual rhetorical devices do we use in order to accomplish these strategies? And so that's what we're going to go over. But for this week, really what we want to be able to understand is actually kind of taking in what is rhetoric. And so the 2 most important things to remember is the audience and the message. Okay, so think about it. If I want to teach a bunch of 6th graders something, that I'm going to have a completely different approach than how I'm going to teach my 11th graders something, right? My audience matters, because what works for 6th graders doesn't always work for 11th graders, although actually that does work more. Like what works for 6th graders does work for 11th graders, just not vice versa. What works for my 11th graders, my 6th graders can't quite grasp, right? So it's really important that you always remember who is the audience. So when we're trying to come up with communication, we have to think that, right? As the speaker, as the person that's creating this communication, we have to know who our audience is. And because that helps us know, okay, what types of things would work with this audience, right? Am I just talking to teenage girls? What are different things that would work with teenage girls versus if I was talking to teenage boys, right? Or if I'm talking to young adults or I'm talking to children, all those things, then what I'm choosing, the different devices, right? Or rhetorical tools that I want to use are going to be different depending on my audience. Okay, so I always have to keep that in mind. Who's my audience, and then what's my message, right? And then all rhetoric is what do I do to get my message to my audience? And really, it's anything. Okay? Anything you do in order to get your message to your audience is rhetoric. You're using a rhetorical device. Okay? That can be font choice, that can be color, right? That can be using humor, that can be putting a narrative in, putting facts in, all those things that kind of we do because we know that makes good communication. We're using rhetoric all the time. We're just not necessarily labeling it rhetoric, but it is kind of this easier thing to understand than I think students sometimes get a little scared of it. But that's kind of what it is. So hopefully that's a little bit of a good background for what rhetoric is. If you're confused, let me know if you have questions about it. So you're going to have 2 assignments this week. You're going to kind of be able to fill in your own rhetorical triangle, like I just did. And then you're also going to be able to find out what is rhetoric and how are people using rhetoric. Okay, so you can do those 2 assignments, and then like always, you're going to have your reading log. So make sure that you're doing your reading. Okay, please let me know if you have any questions as we're jumping into rhetoric. This will be what we're kind of talking about for the whole rest of the year. So it's good to remember and know. So if you have questions, let me know. All right, have a good week.